A wise philosopher once said, "If your spaces ain't liminal, consider yourself a Weirdcore," which is enough to make a kid core cry. By the way, I'm hosting a Halloween art contest. You can find the submission link on the community tab, and the winner gets a $10 gift card of their choice. Submissions close at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 30th, which is when we'll be looking at them together on a live stream. This video will cover 3 lessons I've learned during my tenure analyzing liminal space images. So pause your Family Guy funnies and put away the Subway Surfers as we dine on some brain nourishment. Lesson 1. Liminality. In the context of whatever we're discussing, the nature of liminality changes. Not to be melodramatic, but ambiguity exists in transition. But how many liminal space images do we look at that exist within these defined parameters? At this point, years later from their initial craze, we're past the point of sticking to these strict definitions. We've culturally shifted towards a more loosely defined visual of what constitutes a liminal space outside of what the term means in a traditional sense. What I'm trying to get at essentially is we're at a point where we have appropriated liminal space images as this vague aesthetic. We often find liminal space images to be empty, usually cold or dreary, scenes that lack a human presence. I specifically say presence and not interference because human interference does exist within these images. When I'm considering candidates for analysis, I'm mostly considering the photographic or artistic qualities rather than just the subject matter. I appreciate art, so I recognize the value in every submission I get, but not everything I see appeals to me and says, "Investigate me further. What mysteries am I hiding?" Some images have defined subject matter with an established chronology and clear boundaries. Photos like this have obvious merit, and again, the content is not a point of contention. At some point, though, a line needs to be drawn in the sand to separate empty spaces and liminal spaces. Both the viewer and the artist need to decide whether the theme truly is transition, or does it obscurely convey the melancholy, isolating narrative that can sometimes overlap with the experience of transition. Lesson 2. Framing. The liminal space as a contemporary genre extends out from photography into any medium. Drawing, painting, video games, renders, and so on are all examples where liminal spaces can be present, and that's still not an exhaustive list. This series, however, focused specifically on images. A staple consideration in the formal appreciation of photography is framing. Any person with a camera worth their salt, whether they be student, teacher, photographer, or videographer, will tell you, even if you have the most interesting and unique subject that has ever existed, without proper framing, you have nothing. And the subject is wasted. So framing is a fundamental aspect of a good image candidate, regardless of whether it falls into the confines of a liminal space. For the record, it doesn't necessarily have to be conventional either, like the rule of thirds, leading lines, golden ratio, or whatever. Just something that displays a unique charm. Often you'll know it when you see it. This applies to liminal space images especially, as we often see the same subject repeated. Not to say that subject isn't important, obviously, but without interesting framing, it isn't going to stand out, and the entire image is mundane. As a disclaimer, artistic vision, and by extension, photo composition, is entirely subjective. I've made art in the past that I was passionate about, and others might not have seen my vision. But at the same time, I've made art I wasn't confident about, and where the feedback I got was nothing but positive. My advice is to be conscious of this whenever you're making anything, and to try and detach your ego from what you produce, so you're more open to growth. Lesson 3. Narrative. One of the most challenging aspects of these videos is selecting what to include and what not to include. Content is growing exponentially, and not slowing down anytime soon. I've been doing this for a couple years now and have created almost 20 videos specifically dissecting liminal space images. And with each video, as I learn about art and experience more, my perspective changes and my filter becomes more selective. To prevent my content from being monotonous, I've experimented with creating various collections. Images from specific users, specific countries, or images with specific aesthetics, allowing them to be appreciated in their own right while being part of a larger narrative and contributing to the series. As we know, I made a promise years ago that it was my goal to eventually cover every single liminal space submission within the channel, which was an unrealistic goal, but that's exactly why I pursued it. I thought it would present this grand narrative of scaling a digital mountain. So along the way, I started incorporating rules. Well, one rule really. Inactive accounts wouldn't have their images selected. A couple of times I broke the straight chronological order and just started jumping around to images that stood out to me. I might abandon this quest because that narrative doesn't serve its purpose anymore, and I've learned that it's more important to compromise when the steps I'm taking don't contribute to my overall goal. By doing this, I believe that these videos will yield the best results, both from the community and my fulfillment in the content I'm making. And hopefully, you can understand that as well. As always, thank you for watching, and take care.